I've got two things for you today. Number one, guys, if you are looking for a job or for some business, open a bike store. Not even bike store because you would have to invest some money in bikes. Open a bicycle service workshop simply by investing maybe $300, $500 into the tools, and then you'll be ready to do so many things on the bikes. So that's number one. And number two, those who already have bike stores, don't let such bikes out of your workshop.
So here's the deal. One of my viewers comes to me with his bike and he thinks what the bike needs, but if I only did what he asked for, it would be wrong. It would be very wrong. Here's why. He's asking me to loosen the stuck screws or bolts in the pedals. He's also complaining about the chain rubbing against the front mag. Can we fix it? And then he says, yeah, the brakes don't simply brake. And rear derailleur needs some adjustment or cleaning, as he said, because it doesn't shift well. But as you'll see right now, in about 5 minutes I found many more issues, 4 of them being pretty important ones for the bike, for the safety of my client, let's call him a client, and also for my money and for his money, because he's going to save a lot of money because of those issues I have found. And I've seen some stores, some bike stores, bike workshops who do only what the client is asking for, even just replacing the inner tube without even looking at the bike. Don't do it. And how to do the inspection, let's look at it right now, and then let's fix those issues. And here is our patient. It doesn't take much time to find some issues. Just look at the bike. Is it clean? Is it dirty? Is it rusty? Does it have a lot of scratches? Then bounce the bike. Bounce the bike simply. By doing it, you'll be able to pick up some play on the bottom bracket, headset, on the hubs. It's not really difficult. It takes so little time. And now more detailed look. The top headset bearing, you're looking for the movement play between the frame, the head tube of the frame, and the cap on the steering tube of the fork. And then the bottom one, simple. If there is no movement here, that's good. In this case, it looks okay to me. The suspension fork, this is the outer and the inner stanchions. We are looking for the movement between those two. Some forks will have a little bit of the movements like out of the box, but if it's a lot, it might mean the fork has been abused. The hubs or the bearings in the hubs. Move the wheel from side to side, stabilizing the bike. It looks good on this side. The rear one, not that good. Listen to the play in the bearing. So this one needs adjustment. The crankset, or actually the bottom bracket bearings, we are checking also one side at a time. Rocking this side might actually show you some play on the opposite side, but here it all seems to be fine. Back to the suspension fork. How does it work? Does it work smoothly? Yes, it does. But isn't it too soft? Yes, it is. I can bottom out this fork without any problems. This is why the client or the viewer said, I need to replace this fork with a carbon rigid fork, so he won't have to spend the money if I fix this problem. Now the damping, so we are looking if the damping works, if the fork doesn't blow up going back to its position, it's okay here. The lockout. The lockout should make the fork either completely stiff or should allow a little bit of movement. This is fine here. Guys, please check the tire pressure, because people who are not into cycling usually have too low of a pressure in the tires, which is not safe to ride, easy to get a puncture, and bad for the tires. After getting the permission from the client to fix all those issues, I know that the bike will have full service, so I will clean it first because this bike is dirty. The The machine has been washed with my cursor, and yes, if you know how to use high pressure water, you can do it. Now during the cleaning you'll be able to find any problems with the tires, some scratches, some cracks, and now I'm gonna show you how to do it. Look for scratches or cracks on all of the joints and welds. Even if it's a carbon frame, you wanna look at the head tube area, connection between the seat tube and the other tubes, of course the dropouts of the bike, and here the bottom bracket area, important one. The fork will lose oil or air if the stanchions are scratched. Now check this one out. Our patient has a problem with the rear derailleur hanger. If you don't have a special tool for checking this one out, you can shift to different gears and make sure that the cage stays parallel to, let's say, rear wheel axis or perpendicular to the floor. This one is bent and it won't shift well on all of the gears. The wheels, do they spin freely, long and without any noises? Are the wheels true? Now remember, when looking at the movement of the tire, you might actually see the tire being set not correctly on the rim, so look at the movement of the rim itself as well. And don't miss such issues. Don't miss those. We've already checked whether there is any play in the headset bearings. There is none, but also you should check whether the handlebars are working freely without any friction. In this case, you can see there will be some problems with the bearing races in the headset. The brakes, disc brakes and rim brakes. The lever should not touch or come close to the handlebars, and the brakes should not feel spongy. Once they start braking, the lever should feel firm. This one is rubbish. The shifters, they should feel smooth with not too much of a resistance, but good feedback. Check also all the functions of your shifters, which means upshifting, downshifting, multiple shifting, in this case also two-way release that Shimano have. They should all work and not be jammed. If you have the left one, check that one as well. The gears, do not forget to check the lowest one and the highest one, because you don't want to see any chain drop between the cassette and the frame and the cassette and the wheel, because that's very dangerous. You don't want to have any chain drop at the front as well. It's also dangerous for the rider. In this case, you see that in the middle of the cassette the gears are not really working properly, which means that the derailleur hanger might be bent. The chain wear indicator. The more wear on your chain, the longer the chain becomes. A good indicator will show you two levels, 0.5 and 0.75. You want to always replace the chain at 0.75. I usually replace it at 0.5, especially with the alloy or titanium cocks. This is the easy way to check the bearings on the free hub. As you can see, it spins freely. Then I remove the chain easily, quickly, and see that the bearings in the bottom bracket are great. The teeth inspection on the cassette and on the crankset. Not all the teeth will look the same. So they might be worn, but they also might be made for better shifting. But we are looking for some shark fin patterns. If you see that the teeth become more sharp and they look like a shark fin, it might mean that the chain hasn't been replaced when it should have been, and so all the drivetrain is to be replaced. Now on to our client's request. Number one, stock adjustment screws on the SPD pedals. These screws are adjusting the level of tightness of those springs, which means how easy or how difficult will be to clip in and clip out. I could see right away that this bolt has been damaged by the client, but when you do it very, very carefully with a high quality Allen key, you can fix it. Listen for the first movement of this bolt. This is it. And it is perfectly normal for these bolts to get stuck a little bit, at least, because sometimes we just adjust it once and then leave it like that. and seems like our customer wanted to readjust something on the pedals, and he noticed it's not possible anymore. So I was able to loosen all these four, so 2 on one pedal, 2 on other pedal. I'm also checking the play on the pedal. It's kind of okay. What I'm doing right now is also cleaning the spring and the whole platform, and putting a little bit of lube on it, because that's a great protection against mud, water and rust. And it's a regular chain loop. Client's request number 2, the chain rubbing against the front derailleur. Some cranksets just bend under the weight of the rider, but in this case there is nobody sitting on the bike, and there is something going wrong for sure here. What I want to find out right now is whether it's only a chainring bent, or all 3 chainrings are not true in the same manner, and I can see that it is a whole crankset bent. Facing of the bottom bracket shell might help here, but I think that it's the chainset that needs to be replaced, because it's a good chainset with the integrated spindle. For the Octalink or the square taper, that would be normal, something not to be true. In this case, it might be bent. So issue number 2 not solved. The issue number 3, the brakes not braking. And I don't think I will only need to bleed these brakes, because I think those are no longer hydraulic, these are pneumatic, because there is more air inside the system than there is the oil. I'm removing the wheel, I'm removing the pads. I will also replace the pads with my own SB pads, which are great. It's always good moment to either inspect or replace the pads too. If you don't have any original bleeding block, use anything that will fit. This is the older type of the Shimano hydraulic brakes, so we are not using the funnel here because there is no port for the funnel. But this system is also very easy, and actually you don't need to buy any specific tools for bleeding these. As you can see, there is almost no oil in the reservoir, or no oil there. Shimano uses mineral oil, which is great, the best in my opinion. Just use some simple tube and some plastic bag, and that's it. You don't need to buy specific tools. I've also made a full video about how do I bleed this system. I'm only showing you how does it look like. It takes maybe 10-15 minutes to bleed and refill also the reservoir. The important thing is not to allow any bubbles, any air to come through the reservoir here into the system. That's why I'm always refilling that reservoir, so that there is always some oil there. So the old oil replaced with the new one. Now the brake is really firm, which means it will brake finally. So after this, I'm refilling it, the reservoir to the full, and then of course closing the system, clean everything. You don't want any oil to get to your braking pads. Then the seal, the cover, easy peasy, no problem with that. Now I need to do the same with the rear one. And finally our rear derailleur. As you can see, it does not shift well or very precise only on some of the gears, like right here in the middle of the cassette, which might confirm that the derailleur hanger is bent. But the customer asked me anyway to clean thoroughly and loop the rear derailleur, which I'm gonna do. But first, let's take the advantage of the external cable routing on this bike. dirty cables and housings can have a lot of impact on the shifting performance. And so, since we have the external cable routing here, we can remove the housing a little bit and put some simple chain loop on the cable. Make sure that the chain loop is only on the cable which is under the housing. So any naked parts of the cable must be clean and dry with no oil. You don't want any dirt to be there. Now the rear derailleur, you can already see the clean one. I have detailed this one. So now I'm assembling it, but first I will just shortly show you how did I clean it. You can also see it on the separate video on my channel, but here it is. Guys, just be aware that cleaning the rear derailleur doesn't have that much impact on the performance of the rear derailleur unless it's super rusty and the pivots don't really work. Here it seems to be fine. You don't want to have too much play on the jockey wheels, especially on the guide pulley, so the top one. It seems like the owner has never washed his bike, so I'm just removing all the dirt, all the pieces, particles of some sand and anything. So the rear derailleur is really like new right now, so it should shift very, very crisp. So let's see how it works. Let's listen to it. Well, it's better, but it was a small compensation for that bent derail hanger. That's it for our customer's request. Now we're gonna fix those issues we have found ourselves, and the customer said he will pay for those. The broken spoke is something you cannot miss. In order to replace broken spoke, you need to remove both the cassette and the disc brake rotor. You also need to find the right length of the spoke. Those lengths can be very, very similar to each other, like 292, 294, and if you have a broken spoke, it might be difficult to find the right one. You can always use the spoke that you already have in your bike and just measure it. Then look at the pattern of those spokes, of the lacing, and make sure that the one you are replacing will fit exactly as the one that was broken. You don't want to change the pattern of those spokes, of this lacing. After replacing the spoke and putting the wheel back on your bike, you want to check the tension of the spokes, and the wheel will need some truing because the broken spoke will always mean imbalance in the tension of all of the spokes. So we're gonna fix it. It's okay now. The rear hub has two problems: the play on the bearings and also the bearings not working really quietly, which means there is some dirt in the bearings. You can also see the thread here, which is damaged, and the bearing race here on the cap and cone system also not really good. So this hub might not have been serviced at all, probably. Those races should be replaced, but the customer didn't ask for that, so we are trying to reassemble everything back to how it was with the parts that we have available. You can see the races here; those should be replaced. So I'm trying to put a lot of grease here, a little bit more than I would usually do. And also now when assembling the cap and cones, I'm trying to leave just a little bit of play so that the hub will still move freely, and I must tell you, I did a good job here. The customer will still be able to do some thousands of miles on it. Our client wanted to replace the fork with some carbon rigid fork because this one is rubbish. No surprise when you don't have air in your air fork, guys. So good that we noticed that, and now I'm pumping the fork according to the weight of the rider. The rider might tell you that he weighs, let's say, 90 or 100 kilograms or less, or you can just look at the rider and think, okay, he needs 10 more PSIs. So the fork works, but it will not bottom out every time he rides. And as a small thank you to your customer who is coming regularly to your store, you can simply clean and lube the chain. 5 minutes of work, everybody is happy, and we have finished servicing the old and tired but now very good bike.
This is a perfect example of the win-win situation. I have earned much more money that I would have earned if I only did what the customer was asking about. Of course, I have informed the customer that there is more things to do, which he accepted. And number two, my customer has saved a lot of money, because if I didn't fix the rear wheel, for example, the one broken spoke, he would be breaking more spokes, he could actually damage the rim, he could have an accident in some extreme situations. So this is win-win situation, and also the fork is not too soft for the weight of my customer because there was no air in it. Simple. So he doesn't have to replace the fork with some carbon rigid fork he was telling me about. Of course, he can do it just for the sake of making the bike lighter, which is not necessary, especially on such a bike, non-racing bike. But this fork is definitely fitting the weight and the riding style of my customer after I did like 40 seconds pumping on the fork. Easy. So that's the main theme of this episode. Thanks for watching. Give me some thoughts of how are you being treated in the workshops, in the bike stores when you are coming with the bikes, and you, serviceman, tell us how do you do it and did you like it. That was cool to show you. See you soon. Bye bye.